Good morning, students. Students of class 10, welcome to your English grammar class. Students, in our last WhatsApp class, we have already discussed regarding the classification of a adverb clause. Today, let us discuss regarding your conditional clause in greater detail. Students, conditional clause or if clause can be classified or can be categorized into four types, namely your type 0, type 1, type 2 and type 3. These are the four types of if clause or conditional clauses. Is it? Your type 0 conditional clause is expressed in case of a law of nature, universal truth, mathematical truth, and your scientific truth also. Let us take an example. Students, I am going to just give you an example of type 0 conditional clause. That is, if you pour oil on water, if you pour oil on water, it floats. Is it? You see, this what if you pour oil on water, it is a subordinate clause and also an adverb clause, and it is what if clause. It can be told your if clause, and it floats, it is your main clause. Students, you remember one thing, in type 0 conditional clause, your if clause becomes simple present and your main clause becomes also simple present. That means your if clause, its structure becomes if subject plus your what verb 1. That means it remains in your what simple present, and your main clause also is in your simple present. That means if clause and main clause both are in your simple present, and this type of your type 0 conditional clause can be applied, can be expressed in case of your universal truth and scientific truth or general truth, etc. Is it, or law of nature, like that? Okay, that means what I gave you this example, if you pour oil on water, it floats. It is your what general truth. If you add 2 and 2, it makes 4. It is a what mathematical truth, and it becomes what type 0 conditional clause. Okay. If what sun rises, the eastern sky looks bright, it is also an example of your type 0 conditional clause. Okay, let us come to your what type 1 conditional clause. In type 1 conditional clause, what we say 50-50. That means if one thing happens, another thing will happen. That too will be told what your what 50-50 chances. I can give you an example. If I go to College Square, I will bring you a dictionary. This is a case, or this is an example of your type 1 conditional clause. In type 1 conditional clause, I can write that sentence, if I go to College Square, College Square, College Square, I will bring you, I will bring you a dictionary. Bring you a dictionary. Is it? This is an example of your type 1 conditional clause. Students, you remember one thing in this context. In this context, your if clause becomes what? Your simple present, and main clause will what? In structure that subject with what? Modal plus verb 1. Is it? What I told you. I can give you another examples of your what? Type 1 conditional clause. If you go to Puri, you will visit Lord Jagannath. This is also an example of type 1 conditional clause. Similarly, I can give you another example of type 1 conditional clause. If you go to Konark, you will visit sunrise, or you will visit your Konark sun temple. Is it? What I gave you these three examples, they are your what? Type 1 conditional clause, in which your main clause will be subject plus modal plus verb 1, and if clause becomes your simple present. Is it? Let us come to your next type of conditional clause, that is your imaginary or what? Hypothetical sentence. Okay, first I want to give you some example of this type of conditional clause, and this type of conditional clause is classified as your type 2 conditional clause. In type 2 conditional clause, we what? Express some hypothetical or what? Imaginary sentences. Imaginary expression. Okay. If I were a bird, I would fly in the sky. Or if I were a kite, I would fly in the sky. If ponds were rivers, they would fall into the sea. What I gave you these three examples, they are the example of your type 2 conditional clause. You see, this what? Type 2 conditional clause is expressed in case of imaginary or hypothetical sentences. Means, I am not a bird, I cannot fly in the sky. But this sentence we can express, if I were a bird, I would fly in the sky. अर्थात जदि मु चढ़ेटीए हुअंती मु आकाशरे उड़ंती. जदि पोखरी गुड़िक नदी हुअंता सेमाने समुद्र रे पड़ंते. अर्थात इफ पॉन्ड्स वेर रिवर्स दे वुड फॉल इनटू द स्काई. इफ आई न्यू his address, another example, if I knew his address, I would write to him. Means, you see, you follow this structure. If I knew his address means if clause becomes in your simple past, means subject plus verb 2. What I told you previously, if I were a bird, if I knew his address, if ponds were a river, that means subject plus your verb 2, that will be the case of your what? If clause. And next I told you, I would fly in the sky means I would, subject plus would plus verb 1. That is what your type 2 conditional clause. And students, In type 3, conditional clause will be expressed in case of unfulfilled past. Unfulfilled past means I was not a king, I could not make you my minister. This sentence can be told in type 3 conditional clause. If I had become a king, I would have make you, I would have made you my, sorry, I would have made you my minister. ଯଦି ମୁଁ ଜଣେ ରାଜା ହେଇଥାନ୍ତି, I was not a king. If I had had money, I would have helped you. Means in type 3, your if clause becomes past perfect and main clause becomes what? Subject would or could plus have plus verb 3. Students, these are the what example or what explanation of your conditional clause type 0, type 1, type 2, type 3. Okay, and students, in next class we will discuss your in grammar class about your passive. Is it? Thank you.